Hey guys, it's Shara from Woodshop Diaries, and in this video, I'm gonna show you how I built a simple vanity for my parents' half bathroom. As you can see, I painted this vanity blue, which is not quite my usual style, but Mom saw my recent laundry room cabinets and she really liked the color, so we're doing that again here. This was a really fun and simple build, and I'm excited to share it with you, so if you're ready to dive in and get building, let's go. This is actually the first of 4 bathroom vanity projects that I'll be building and sharing over the next couple of months. So if this one's not for you, I'll have more designs and styles coming soon. But of the 4, this is the simplest and least expensive option. I started with building the legs by gluing up 2x4s. This entire project was built using inexpensive construction lumber, pre-primed pine boards, and birch plywood. I've included the full tools and materials list in the printable plans and below in the video description so that you can see what all is needed to complete the build. I glue up 2x4s to make furniture legs pretty often, and people often ask why I don't just use a 4x4. And you certainly can if you'd like to, but where I live, you can't find untreated 4x4s off the shelf. You have to special order them. They're pretty expensive and usually they look like garbage. So I usually prefer to just glue up 2x4s, then square off the edges on the table saw to give me a nice clean 3" by 3" post for the legs. I trimmed these legs down to about 34 inches long and used some wood filler to fill and smooth out the knots and any small gaps in the seams. These are obviously not perfect, they're made from 2x4s, so I just kind of tried to smooth out the best that I could. Next, I started cutting down the plywood for the 2 side panels. Then I trimmed some 1x3s and 1x2s to make the vanity frame. I used 1x3s for the framing at the top and around the drawers, but I used 1x2s at the bottom for the shelf. Now, just a note, I checked the existing plumbing where this was going, and the bottom of the P-trap was about 12 inches from the floor. So I built the top section of this vanity so that it comes down 12 inches from the bottom of the legs. That way it covers the plumbing completely, but it leaves as much room as possible below for the open shelf. So altogether I needed 4 legs, 2 side panels, 4 1x3s, and 4 pieces of 1x2. 2 long pieces for the front and back, and 2 short pieces for the sides. After sanding, I drilled pocket holes into the ends of the 1x3s and the plywood side panels. For the 1x2s, standard size pocket holes work totally fine, but I like to use the Craig micro jig because it drills 30% smaller holes, so it's just less likely to split on these narrow boards. Once all the pocket holes were drilled, I assembled the frame using pocket hole screws. I installed the plywood panels 3/4 inch inset from the inside edge of the legs, and I installed the 1x2s 1.5 inches up from the bottom. The back 1x3s were installed flush to the back edge of the legs, but I inset the front 1x3s about 3/4 inch. This just added some extra dimension to the design. By the way, I know this looks like a Frankenstein project with all the different colored pieces. I knew that I was going to be painting this, so I tried to use as many scraps as I could. So some of these scraps had already been painted. Once the main vanity frame was assembled, I set it down to make sure everything looked okay. Now, I know my shop floor is unlevel, but I was a bit concerned at the amount that this frame was rocking. Then I realized that I had just set it down on a rock. Crisis averted. Next, I added another 1x3 turned sideways to separate the top and the bottom drawer. I actually should have added this earlier, but to be honest, I just completely forgot. Now, the top drawer is fake, so it's really just a drawer front, but I did need something behind it to secure it to. So I took some scrap plywood blocks and trimmed them to run between the drawer divider and the top 1x3. I drilled pocket holes into the bottom end of these pieces, then screwed these in place. Now, this part is totally optional, but I wanted the drawer front to be inset about 1/4 of an inch. So I also cut some scrap 1/4 inch plywood to go between these pieces and the top 1x3. Then I made sure that the bottom was 1 inch inset before securing with pocket hole screws. The fake drawer front can now attach to these pieces, but we'll do that in just a minute. Next up was installing the drawer slides for the actual drawer. Since I installed the side panels 3/4 inch from the inside edge of the legs, I needed to first add some 3/4 inch plywood spacer blocks to be able to mount the slides to. I glued and screwed these pieces in place, then screwed the drawer slides onto them so that they were 1 inch inset from the bottom 1x3 framing piece. I have a full video on installing drawer slides that I will link in the video description for more information on that. Once the slides were installed, it was time to actually build the drawer. Drawers in bathroom vanities can be a little tricky because you have to deal with the plumbing. It's important to look at and measure your plumbing locations, or at least be prepared to move them if you're into that, so that you know what you're dealing with and how to work around them. In this case, the existing plumbing had been used for a pedestal style sink previously, so thankfully everything was pretty centered and close together. So I was able to build a drawer box to fit around it. I assembled this U-shaped drawer box using scrap 3/4 inch plywood. I needed the opening on the backside to be about 11 inches wide to clear the plumbing, and I made it about 5 inches deep at the front to make sure that I had enough room to clear the sink drain. In hindsight, I could have made it a little deeper and still had room for the drain, but I played it pretty safe here because I didn't want to take it apart and have to build it again. Normally, I cut dados to install the drawer bottom, but in this case, with the weird shape, I just assembled it with pocket holes, then traced out a 1/4 inch plywood bottom to fit that shape. I glued and stapled this bottom panel in place. Then I screwed the drawer slides onto the sides of the drawer box and slid it into the vanity. Now I could move on to attaching the drawer fronts. These drawer fronts were just 3/4 inch plywood panels that I cut to fit these openings. They're 1/4 inch smaller than the openings in both height and width so that they'll have an 1/8 of an inch gap around all sides. I screwed the fake drawer front in place through the block that I added earlier, then I attached the real drawer front using screws through the front of the drawer box. Next, I added some simple trim to dress this cabinet up a little bit. For some reason lately, I'm just really into lattice trim, so I added some lattice trim on the front 1x3s. Then I trimmed both sides with a 1x3 at the top and a 1x3 at the bottom. Now the last part was adding the shelf. Mom wanted an open shelf here made using slats, not a solid panel. So I cut pre-primed 1x4 boards to lay out here along the 1x2 braces. I originally hadn't planned to notch out the 2 end pieces to wrap around the legs, but after laying them out, I thought it would look better, so I used the jigsaw to notch the corners of the left and right boards until they fit around the legs. I didn't attach these pieces yet because I thought it would be much easier to paint them first. So after everything was fitted, puttied, and sanded, I started painting. I primed everything that wasn't already primed, then I applied a couple coats of paint. This color is Sherwin-Williams Stardew, and it's the same color that I used on my recent laundry room cabinets. After the paint had dried, I spaced out the shelf slats and nailed them in place. Now, I did have to putty over the nail holes and touch up a little paint here, but I still think that that was much easier than trying to paint in between all of them if they were already attached. Then I added the drawer pulls to finish this up. I'm sorry about the footage being so blurry here. I did not realize that until after I started editing, but because the drawer is so shallow on the bottom, I had to use a 90-degree driver attachment to drive the screws. Kind of a pain, but it worked. And with that, this vanity is complete.
This is obviously not my parents' powder room, but they're not quite ready for this yet, so I'm just going to stage it here against this wall in my shop. When we get it into their powder room, we'll secure it to the wall studs through this top support and then add the granite countertop. As far as tops, there are a ton of like pre-made countertops that you can buy from the big box store. You can check your local granite people, and a lot of times they have scraps that they can cut you a small vanity top from. It's not super expensive. That's what I did in this case. So I'm going to set that top on here so I can show you what it's going to look like, but I'm not going to attach it yet. When we do get around to attaching it, we're just going to use some construction adhesive that's designed to be used with granite and stone to just like put a bead around the top and set the top in place.
I've got the printable plans to build one of your own available now, but if you're looking for more vanity ideas, I can't wait to show you the other 3 designs that I'm working on next. So if you aren't already following along, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on those. It's going to be a busy next several months with lots of builds, so I hope you're as excited about them as I am. Thanks so much for watching, friends, and until next time, happy building!